Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Jessica Knoll is the author of Bright Young Women, a novel. This is her second time on the podcast. Last time she came on to talk about Luckiest Girl Alive, which is now a major motion picture from Netflix, starring Mila Kunis, which is really good, by the way. She also wrote The Favorite Sister, and now, of course, Bright Young Women, which was chosen for 8 million things, including a Book of the Month Club pick and Sarah Selects from Sarah Gelman's Amazon Book Review Book Club, and so many others. She has been a senior editor at Cosmopolitan and the article's editor itself. She grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia and graduated from the Shipley School in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, and from Hobart and William Smith Colleges in Geneva, New York. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and their bulldog. Welcome, Jessica. Thanks so much for coming back on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, this time for Bright Young Women, your amazing new novel.
Thank you for having me back. It feels like we were just doing this.
I know, right?
I don't know how a whole year has passed.
Seriously, you better slow down your writing. What's going on here?
My publisher would beg to differ.
Okay, can you please tell listeners what your book is about?
So Bright Young Women is a fictional reimagining of what it was like to survive the crimes of Ted Bundy, told from the perspective of some of the women from his final murderous spree, which is in Tallahassee, Florida, which I actually did not know until I started researching this book. I always had him kind of firmly in Seattle. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, the way you tell the story is so vivid and real. Like, you start out with all of us being in the sorority house and getting to know the sorority president, Pamela, right? Super well.
Pamela.
Down to, how she gets ready for bed, basically. Like, all the details of her wandering around the hallway until the unthinkable starts to happen, and you show us as it unfolds, and then show us with her calling the parents, and show us like escaping and blah, blah, blah. And then you go on, taking us right into what it must be like, and then the consequences after. How were you able, and I don't know if it was part research or just imagination or what, to recreate or what you imagine that would be and really like put someone in that action like that?
So one of the sorority sisters, about 10 years after he was convicted and was in jail, and it was like, because he was executed in 1989. So I think it might have been the same year he was finally executed. She basically went on to campaign for victim rights, and she was integral in getting the Victims' Bill of Rights added to the Florida state constitution. It was the first time any state had elevated victims' rights to the status of like constitutional rights. And so you can read this Victims' Bill of Rights that the residents of Florida voted to put into their state constitution. And it was directly, and I don't put this in the book because it's not my story to tell, but it was directly related to her experience and her sister's experiences from how they were treated by the police. Not that they had anything, ill to say about the police. It was just that there was no training. So part of the Victims' Bill of Rights was like to implement training about how to approach victims of violence and where they can turn to for kind of state sanctioned like refuge. Like a lot, like their whole thing was like, when this happened, they were like, well, don't stay in the house, but we don't have anywhere for you to stay.
I could not believe that.
Yeah. So it's like they had to find their own accommodations. I mean, I still think it's not great for victims of crime, but there are at least like victim compensation programs that now law enforcement is trained to say to a victim of a violent crime, you can go to this website. This is going to give you all the information. Like they didn't have anything like that. So really just like reading through this victim's bill of rights was like very, very important. It really helped me shape those early hours after the attack down from like, they didn't even have like an advocate who was giving them correct information about who had passed away, who had survived. So like even that call where she calls and she thinks one of the girls is alive and the other one isn't, like that's all based on stuff that I gathered from the Bill of Rights.
Oh my gosh. And then having to call the parents back and be like,
yeah,
oh my gosh, I just said she was okay. And oh my gosh. Still though. And what about like getting all of the sorority, like the time of year and all of that? Like I was just so moved by the specificity of it all. And I know that's part of writing and part of everything, but even when they did find refuge in the older sorority sisters' home and had the one sort of dinky guy like standing guard outside,
yeah.
and, you know, even like how you imagined, like tell me about the characters and their relationships and the boyfriend and all of that.
Yeah. So all of that is really, I just came up with that, you know, but because there's not a lot written about the victims, which is so like, I really only had kind of like, this is the date, you know, the attacks happened. This is the date he was finally apprehended. This was the date of the trial. So then I just tried to like shape a story kind of around those coordinates. And I really appreciate you saying it felt real in terms of the 1970s and what it would be like to live in a sorority house, because the college I went to did not have sororities. So like that's a complete, as foreign a concept to me as being a 21-year-old woman in 1978 and what that would be like. I ordered a lot of off eBay. I ordered a lot of women's magazines from the 70s because I figured that would give me a real sense of like, even how to describe like their clothing or like what the kind of home design scene was like at the time. What was the food they were eating? What was the color nail polish they were wearing? So I ordered like all these old Cosmos and McCalls and like just really incredible. Like, it's just amazing. Like it was amazing to get my hands on them. And I just read them cover to cover. I also was able to order like, I don't even know what these are called because again, I wasn't in a sorority and I'm so unfamiliar with this, but sororities all have like, I don't know if they still do, but they have like quarterly magazines that they release to the alumni network. So I could like, there were ones that I just like pulled from eBay from like 1977, 1978. And it was just like very comprehensive about like what the girls in all of the chapters were like, you know, studying what the causes that there's a lot of fundraising, like what the causes were that they cared about, what sorts of events did they have, parties, like formals, all of these things. So like, that's really where I got a lot of my information. Thank God for eBay.
I feel like if this were a Jeopardy question, I would get it wrong when it's like, this author used eBay to form the details of her 2023 thriller. Yeah. You know, I would never guess Jessica Knoll, you know, who is, you know. Yeah. I worked at Vanity Fair in Condé Nast one summer, and I had to go into the library there and like paw my way through all the past episodes. The fact that you can just like do on eBay and just get them is, I mean, it would have saved me like a million hours.
I used to also work so I worked at Cosmo, and I could, if I was like, same thing, if like an editor was like, oh, can you like pull this? I could get lost for hours.
Yes.
Hours. It just was fascinating to read, like, just, I mean, you just could be completely transported to a different time period. It would be like watching a movie.
Yep. And even the ads, like I feel like the ads tell so much of the story.
Oh my God, the ads, the cigarette ads.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's a total time warp.
Yeah.
I did another project in college actually on the way marriage is depicted in magazines over time.
Oh, interesting.
Which was also very interesting. So
anyway, I thought that was a real eye opener.
It really was. It really was. But yeah, and the power of magazines to report.
Yeah.
I love how you said that you anchored this around the coordinates, because that seems like such a good writing assignment. Like take these 4 dates and write a novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then it's hard to, it's one thing to say it, it's yet another to fill it in with the things that people relate to, which of course are the emotions and the people.
Yeah.
When you were crafting your characters, the heart of all the characters, like how did you think about sort of building all of that out and also creating that sense of propulsion that the story demanded?
Yeah, it was harder than it sounds. And I also was under kind of a misguided belief like, oh, this is going to be fun and different than how I've written things in the past. And it's going to be, I love that you use like almost like a writing prompt, like how it was in school, like a writing prompt, and like, like some of the work is done for me. It still was like so hard. And I actually found that Pamela's story was more challenging than Ruth's because I had more dates that I was trying to hit, like important kind of flashpoints in her story that I was trying to hit, whereas Ruth's story was much more open-ended. And it took my editor and lit agent, because I struggled with Pamela's story so much. I rewrote it so many times. Initially, it was from like even a different character's point of view. Like it wasn't even her point of view. And they were like, actually, Pamela is a really interesting character. Could we try getting the like Tallahassee story from her point of view? And it was actually one of them saying to me, Ruth's story has never given you any problems, and you've been much less constrained by trying to hit these coordinates. So maybe just like, because it is fiction, like you don't have to be so like you can let go of some of this if you wanted to. So when they said that, I think that was when I really started hitting my stride with Pamela, because I realized like I have to get at the emotion of this, and I can't just be relying on these big dramatic points to like kind of carry the story for me. Like I still have to do the work.
Yeah.
I would think I was always trying to make it easier writing.
That's okay. I mean, it's okay. I want it to not be so hard. That's a
Why is it so hard?
I like that you picked Pamela, because as the sorority president, you can just feel her need to control everything. And you're basically taking like this perfectionist personality and being like, everything is wrong. Like nothing is remotely right. Like deal with that, which is of course such an interesting thing to read your way through.
Yeah, she was definitely in a pressure cooker, and I think those are the types of characters we want to read about, where things are just mounting and mounting and mounting until like something has to give, some major decision about life where you just kind of break free and you're like, I've got to start living my life on my own terms, which is, as you know, she gets to that point both professionally and personally in her romantic relationship.
And with her parents. I mean,
and with her parents. Yeah. I was watching some documentary about, disappearances in the wilderness. And there was some story about a kid who'd gone missing for a couple of days and he was presumed dead. And then they found him and it was mysterious, like why he should have been like severely dehydrated and like covered in scrapes, and he wasn't, but he didn't remember anything. And I just remember thinking, oh, what an interesting thing to kind of have as part of your history, your story, but it's something you don't know about yourself. Like how would that kind of inform your life? And how does that kind of function as like almost like a secret the character is keeping, like a little bit of a withholding where you're like, ooh, there's something up with her, but I don't know what it is, where she isn't being kind of annoying and like dangling a carrot. Like she really didn't know her whole story, and like if this hadn't happened to her, she wouldn't have ever gotten the full picture about her life in order to make different choices where she was going to be more fulfilled and have more purpose.
Wow. So then how do you go through the drama of the rewrites and, different characters, and then you put it aside? Do you still do you second guess any of it? Do you go back in your head and think like, should I have kept that, or what could I have done differently? Or are you just like, okay, put that to bed, on to the next?
Like till the final day of like turning in your edits, I think I'm always feeling like there's, the kill your darlings thing, like I killed it, but maybe it could come back this way. It's hard to let go of things that like you think in the beginning are going to be so essential to the story and to your character, and to like let go of those things, especially if those are things that you've really spent a lot of time on, kind of from a craft level, where things are written in a way that you're really proud of, but like it's just not really part of the story anymore. It doesn't, or it's slowing it down in some way or the other. So I do think like letting go of those things is always and will continue to be a challenge for me.
I get that. Everything I delete, I like would save in another file. Just
Always.
in case.
I have
Just in case.
saved. I will say there was like one chunk in this book that I was like really loved the writing of it. And my editor was like, it's just slowing it down. You just kind of want to get to the end, whatever. And I saved it, and I'm pulling a chunk of it for an essay I'm writing.
Oh,
so
good.
It is getting a life somewhere. Excellent. And I cannot tell you how satisfying it was to like copy paste this one paragraph and just plop it in there. And I was like, it's polished, it's done. Like, so always keep those documents, because you never know when they'll somehow be relevant to something you're working on that's like tangentially a part of it, but like not the actual book itself.
Yes, excellent.
Would be my
I'm thrilled for you that you could find it, that you found a place.
Like I repurposed it.
That's excellent. Check plus. That's awesome. Amazing. Do you feel like now that the book is done, you have advice or just a different framework for victims today that you've gotten out of this? Like if you were on the scene, or if you were the one training the police to deal with victims, or like what would be something that should be included in the training?
Yeah, I think a big one is just getting the information at the same time that the police, information that's relevant to what the victim needs to know. But things like, if someone's attacker is like paroled in and they're released from prison early, in some states where a Bill of Rights is not part of the Constitution, like there is no one who is in charge of like alerting a victim to be like, your attacker is like back on the street again. That seems like that to me is like, and I'm reading up about like what victims' rights mean. And it's very complicated because it's like, there's obviously an intersection between like the rights of victims and the rights of the accused. And both parties need to have those rights respected. But I would read horror stories from victims who would like go to their local grocery store, and all of a sudden standing in aisle 9 is the person that killed their sister, And so it's like the idea that there's no one who's kind of assigned, to be in contact with you about that information. That feels like something that a family of a victim or a victim themselves should be, they could be privy to that information without it being a violation of the convicted or the accused rights.
It should really be an automatic email that goes out, right? Like you're connected. What emails are connected to the case?
And also like, how are all the systems connected? Like, it feels like it all feels like very abstract still. Like a lot of this is like, they'll talk about how in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, like police departments and like different precincts like don't work together. So like that's oftentimes how these like serial like rapers or rapers, serial rapists, just to add some levity there, serial rapists or murderers are able to operate because the precincts aren't in touch with one another. But it feels like that's still happening on some level when things could be digitized. So I don't know. I'm not an expert there, but it feels like we still have a long way to go in terms of like what the technology could offer that isn't being utilized.
It's chilling to think about, honestly.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Okay. So what are you working on now? Did you start a new book? Do you have a new book coming out in like 3 months that we're going to talk about?
Oh God, I wish. I am trying to get ahead on a next book just because obviously the strike is going on, the writer's strike, and I have other projects that are on pause because of that. So with this time, I am trying to do my best to like put all my effort into promoting this one and getting ahead on the next one. So that's kind of where I'm at, and we'll see how long it lasts, and hopefully the strike is resolved soon and we can all kind of get back to work on those other projects because I'm really excited about those too.
Yeah. I know you're not supposed to talk about them now, right? So
yeah, we can't.
I won't ask.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the next novel or no?
It's still so rough that I don't there's not really a lot to say, but I will say that it's a little bit the way this one was a departure from my earlier stuff, and that like it's the first time I kind of like left a contemporary period.
Mm-hmm.
This next one is a departure in that like it's a little sexier than I've done before. So
interesting.
Trying some new things.
Yeah, gotta keep it interesting.
Exactly. You get fresh.
Otherwise, like, why do it? You know, gotta have some fun if it's that hard. Did you have input on the cover? Because I thought the cover was so good.
Thank you for saying that. And you know what? I'm in love with the cover, and it was the first try, which has never happened before. With my other two, we went through a couple of batches and being like, this isn't quite right, or this is okay. This one, they took a big swing, and I appreciate that the cover is different, a departure from my other ones, because the story itself is a big departure, you know? So I think that the cover also signifies that. So they really did a brilliant job on it. I think I'm in love with it. So thank you for saying that.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I like devoured the whole thing.
Thank you.
The first 100 pages I read in like one sitting. I was like, don't talk to me, you know, which I love when like, you know,
that's the dream to hear. So,
and then, you know, just like, you know, when you're like petting a book, you're like, this is so good. I was having that feeling like, oh my God, this is so good, because it felt, not to diminish books by saying they felt like movies, but it felt like a surround sound book.
Oh,
you know,
that's
like where you're like, in it, in all your senses, and just like you can't tear away. So that's how I
Thank you, because it was a real fear of mine. Like, if I'm going to do this, I better be able to capture it accurately, you know? So that was a constant fear I was battling when I was writing this. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, I don't know if it was accurate or not, but it was a great read.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it feels accurate.
It feels accurate. It's totally believable. I buy it,
great.
Whether or not it was right. Do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
You know, my advice is always to write and not to wait around for the right time, the right idea. But then I also feel like I contradict myself, because sometimes I do think I start writing too early, like before I've really given an idea and a character time to germinate. So I think I have to find that balance. And I do think that there is a delicate balance there. But if you're a new writer and you've never written before, I think that we tend to err on the side of, well, one day I'll find the right idea and the right, you know, period in my life where like I have the time to do this, you know, and I can give this project the kind of effort and total concentration that it deserves. And I think that if you wait to do that, you'll never find that time. True. Has been my experience. So I think just like go for it. And a lot of times you work things out in the process of writing. You can figure things out in the process of writing. So like, don't try and be too perfect about it, you know, like, oh, now I have my $1 million idea and character and I can start writing. Like, I wish that it could happen like that, but it doesn't.
Do you have any books that you tried writing in between some of the other books that just didn't work?
Oh, yeah. I have one that I put on the back burner probably 5 years ago that I think I will write one day. I still really like the idea. I just hit a point where I didn't quite know how to make it all come together. And I was like, let me try something else. And then I got going on this one. And this one, really, everyone was really excited about it. I felt good about it. But I have kept that one in the back of my head. Like, I know I'll go back to that one day, some way, somehow.
Well, that's good. Then it's not so stressful debating what to do next.
Oh, I mean, yes, but then I feel like I'll probably find myself at the same impasse that I find myself at with every book, where it's like the beginning is exciting, it's a great concept, but then you get to the point where you have to kind of execute. You hit that point in a book inevitably, and it's so hard to do. It's really hard to execute. Like, that's the one thing I've learned in almost 10 years of writing books is like, is pulling that off is the hardest part.
And what's the secret?
A lot of work, a lot of drafts, a lot of headaches, sadly.
Well, at least you can do it, though. I mean, I think that's one of the things that separates fantastic authors from other. I mean, you figure it out and you don't give up.
Yeah.
And it's good.
I mean, and inevitably, whatever you figure out always feels less dazzling than how you had it in your head. You know what I mean? So I think there's still always that part of me where it's like, I conceived that differently, but like I couldn't pull it off in the end.
Well, it's working. Stick with it.
Thank you.
Congratulations on this book, Bright Young Women. It's,
Thank you.
Sure to be a massive hit. It was so good, so well written. And yeah, great job.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And I'll follow up with you on email about the rest.
Yes. Yeah. That all sounds great. And yeah, great talking to you as always.
You too. All right. Good luck.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.